This weekend on Lucha Review, we celebrate my birthday. But before the festivities begin, I hear that we have a challenger at our doorstep. So I got time for at least one shoot promo. We got He-Man coming to us from a faraway land at a faraway time. The defender of Castle Grayskull. Well, I want to see what happens when the most powerful man in the universe, as they say, takes on the most powerful critic on the internet. He-Man, if you still have the power, then you harness every last bit of it and you step into my ring, because you are not the first golden-haired, tan-skinned babyface to cross my path. Tag yourselves in and let's take on the nerdy and dirty. In 1981, around the time of my third birthday, my dad came home with a surprise that would shape the next 40 years of my life. It was the original He-Man action figure, literally and figuratively bigger than any other action figure on the market. Back then, action figures were only 3 3/4 inches tall. It was the standard set by Kenner in Star Wars. He-Man, on the other hand, stood at 5.5 inches tall, and even if he didn't come with a set of weapons and a shield, just one look at the guy was all you needed to know that he could still, seriously, fuck you up. Seconds later, my dad said, "And this is the bad guy," and my eyes opened even wider at the sight of Skeletor. Even more menacing than He-Man, with red eyes staring out of a ghostly skeletal face, Skeletor captured my imagination immediately. Every Saturday, my dad would come home from work with another character to add to my collection. By the time Christmas came, the battle for Grayskull was constantly raging on my bedroom floor. If I wanted a good story to play out, there were plenty of mini-comics and graphic novels to turn to, as the art of He-Man was just as inspiring as the figures. Promotional material typically involved beautiful paintings of fantastic worlds of warriors and wonder, and this trend carried on for the duration of the toy line's success. He-Man had a Sons of Hercules feel, as he roamed the earth, righting wrongs, defending the weak and oppressed, and seeking adventure. Each story saw him getting the better of Skeletor and his goons, but still, he was a bit of a loner, and characters like Teela and Man-at-Arms were pretty much only there to give him someone to talk to. That all changed when the animated series debuted in 1983, as did the concept for He-Man himself. He went from being a wandering barbarian to the cowardly prince of Eternia who told bad jokes. Whenever and wherever there was trouble, Prince Adam would run off and say the words that all Masters of the Universe fans refuse to forget.
By the power of Grayskull,
It wasn't without silliness, as most characters couldn't tell He-Man apart from Adam, while Man-at-Arms often had to tell Orko to shut the fuck up before he ruined the secret. We didn't care though. If Clark Kent could get away with it, then so could Prince Adam. And the proof was in the Jell-O pudding, because the Masters of the Universe were a smash hit in children's television just as they were in the toy stores, and its audience wasn't limited to young boys. Their sisters craved the power too, and in response, He-Man would soon have a sister of his own. The masterminds behind Masters of the Universe created She-Ra, the Princess of Power, and long-lost twin sister of Prince Adam. And there was no better way to introduce her than with The Secret of the Sword in 1985. The Secret of the Sword was He-Man's first feature film, animated by the same studio who cranked out the cartoons we watched after school. The universe in which these masters resided in would be expanded, as He-Man fans would become familiar with the world of Etheria, and with it, a new cast of heroes and villains would emerge. Sadly, I didn't get to see the film in theaters, but the toy stores were more than happy to show me what I missed. In the fall of 1985, just before my 7th birthday, the Masters of the Universe toy line welcomed the Evil Horde. Led by Hordak, these villains were the first in the toy line to have their own distinctive physiques and features. And with the red eyes, sharp teeth, and dark colors, the Evil Horde was comparable to Universal's brood of classic movie monsters. However, the scariest of He-Man horrors wouldn't come to us until 1987, when the live-action Masters of the Universe movie hit theaters. Starring Dolph Lundgren, Frank Langella, and a young aspiring starlet named Courtney Cox, This film pulled He-Man and Skeletor's grudge match out of the fantastical world of Eternia and dropped it onto the boring world of Earth. Not only that, but only a handful of the heroes and villains we knew and loved were brought along for the ride, while new characters did a poor job of filling in for those left behind. Back then, kids' cartoons just weren't turned into live-action films, so I was grateful for this one, and I thoroughly enjoyed Frank Langella's embrace of the Skeletor character, making him darker and more demonic. Unfortunately, the film was largely rejected by fans. Even in 1987, before the advent of CGI, the film still easily could have been better, and it marked the beginning of the end for the Masters of the Universe. Despite the creativity and articulation put into the sixth wave of characters, the toy line was no longer in high demand, and the masters behind the universe had moved on to other projects. He-Man and Skeletor were given makeovers for a 1990 reboot, and the New Adventures of He-Man took these two Masters of the Universe and put them in the actual universe. Their epic battle was now a space opera, and none of their allies or underlings were cast for parts. Between the sci-fi setting and the horrible characters, not even a devoted fan like me could make it past the first episode. It was really your little brother's He-Man, and not for nothing, if I wanted to watch Flash Gordon, I'd watch Flash Gordon. Our little brothers didn't like it either because it was canceled after one season. No tears were shed, for the world was better off without He-Man and Skeletor at all, lest we watch any more of this abomination. And the world would be without He-Man for another 12 years. But, at the start of the 21st century, what once was old was now new again, and heroes and villains of the 1980s were being introduced to a new generation. In 2002, the Masters of the Universe returned to toy stores and televisions in magnificent fashion. It was bittersweet, for I myself had just graduated the School of Visual Arts with a degree in animation, and had I known that the Cartoon Network was rebooting my favorite cartoon, I might have killed someone just for an internship. Sadly, SVA was more focused on our money than on the job placement they promised. Even so, the job wouldn't have lasted long. The toy line didn't have the same appeal it had in the 1980s, nor did the new animated series. It's a shame, too, because both were spectacular. The toys were made with love, while the cartoons were streamlined in appearance and creativity. Once again, the Masters of the Universe were cancelled, but not killed. These heroes and villains live on every year in a 5 fans, 4 fans event called PowerCon, where artists, cosplayers, and toy traders assemble in Anaheim. I myself got to experience it in 2019, and there was no better year to go. I saw the advertisement for it maybe 3 or 4 days prior, threw on my Skeletor shirt, and drove up from San Diego not knowing what to expect. Case in point, I did not expect to see this at one of the vendor tables. I also didn't expect to see Roger Sweet and Mark Taylor, the mind and artist behind the Masters of the Universe. Roger Sweet has the most appropriate last name imaginable, as he seemed overjoyed to pause his trip to the cafeteria for the sake of pictures and autographs with the happiest kid in the world. And I could say the same for Mark Taylor's last name too, because his art was tailor-made for a kid like me who loved drawing warriors and monsters. I bought a pack of his posters, and I was a little choked up when I told him how his work inspired me. Only one of the posters got an autograph, but all of them showed characters and concepts in their original form. The images of Ram-Man and Teela were easily recognized, but if you look close enough at the others, you could see how Beastman, Triclops, and Man-E-Faces evolved from other characters in the set. Lastly, I didn't expect to literally bump into Kevin Smith, who had just announced production on the Netflix reboot of the Masters of the Universe. Doing his Silent Bob routine, he motioned me over for a picture without saying a word. After, with a warm and hearty handshake, he thanked me for coming. And that brings me to here and now, because this very episode of Lucha Review was contingent on what he'd produce, and it didn't exactly sit well with the rest of the internet.
The Kevin Smith He-Man show sucked. It should have been called the Teela Show.
Okay, well, it's not his fault that you're a fucking idiot who throws a temper tantrum because nobody cares about any of the fan theories or story ideas that you post all over Facebook and Twitter. Kevin Smith knows the world wants He-Man and Skeletor, and he's handling it like an old-time wrestling promoter. He's making you wait, and while you wait, he's beefing up the undercard by strengthening the supporting characters and expanding the world of Eternia. The writing and direction are brilliant. It's designed to appeal to the older fans while trying to lure in the younger ones. I nearly cried when I saw the vintage He-Man art, and I nearly cried again when I heard the stellar performances given to these incredible characters. Like most Kevin Smith projects, it felt like a home movie that he made with his friends. But for us longtime fans, it was a love letter that thanked us for our loyalty, and it invited us to enjoy the Masters of the Universe once again with children of our own. Kevin Smith, if you ever see this, I want to thank you for the love and effort you put into Masters of the Universe, and I look forward to seeing what you've got coming up in the second half of the first season. It's a beautiful coincidence for Lucha Review's 40th episode to see the Masters of the Universe in the Hall of Fame on the 40th anniversary of their arrival. You'd never think that it all started with Mattel needing a quick gimmick to compete with Star Wars, but that's ultimately how the Masters of the Universe got started. Yet, between documentaries, toy conventions, and several reboots, these characters prove they truly do have the power. And 40 years later, that power is being harnessed by WWE, DC Entertainment, and multiple generations of artists, cosplayers, and storytellers. Neither fans nor film studios are willing to let this power die. Every few years, in toy stores or on television, the Masters of the Universe renew their battle for Eternia's future. Now don't forget, my lethal luchadors, it is my birthday tomorrow, so join in on the celebration and treat yourself to an adult beverage and a fine meal. Also, be sure to make me feel good by subscribing to this channel and letting the world know that we have the power too. Thanks for tagging in, and I'll see you next week.